Welcome to the People Leaders Podcast, the audio resource for managers and business leaders creating high-performing teams. Join leadership and team development experts Jan and Michelle Turkelson each week as they explore both subjects from every angle. Through practical tips, valuable insights, and compelling interviews with leadership experts around the world, you'll learn how to bring out the best in your staff and how to give your best as a leader.
Hi, Michelle.
Hello, Jen.
So this is a pretty special episode. This is our 100th podcast episode. And
wow.
I know. And so what we thought we'd do is put together a podcast episode that seems to be, like one of the most popular topics that we talk about, and that's really personality. And the focus of the personality types that we're looking at is this introversion, extroversion type. Michelle, you're married to a extrovert.
Yeah, the extrovert's extrovert.
Yeah. And I'm married to a introvert. So even in our own relationships, we see it play out, and we use our relationships to teach, actually, because with the with personality, it really does come to life when you can put yourself in it and understand, that's what's driving that behaviour. And the founders of the Myers-Briggs, Isabel Catherine Briggs, the reason why they did it is because they wanted people to have a better understanding of the differences that we have in the world. So, they were really the forerunners around diversity.
That's right. That's right. Hence the book, Gifts Differing, which is just so true, because everybody, no matter what personality type and, no matter what role you've got, has a gift. And that's the opportunity for leaders, is to find that gift that everybody in their team brings.
Yeah. And so this is another way that leaders or even parents can start to look at the behaviours that they're seeing, with the children that they're nurturing, or just in their own relationships, and try and bring some understanding as to why people are motivated to do the things that they do. Because when we really look at the underlying motivation, we are all doing the best we can. And when we can come from that premise in any situation, I tell you what, it just makes life so much more, agreeable. We really do understand why people act the way they do. And it's more difficult to judge in that situation. So knowledge is definitely power. So let's start off with, we're going to give you the 7 myths of introversion and extroversion. And we always and one of the first things that we want to say is that most people think that there are more extroverts in the world. And the latest research, Michelle, is what?
Is that there's slightly more people with a preference for introversion.
In Australia. Yeah, in Australia anyway. Yeah, so the latest research in Australia is more introverts, slightly more in America. It's just that I think that extroverts are a bit louder.
That's right. And there are more males who have a preference for introversion as well.
Yeah, so that's the truth of the matter. That's not the myth of the matter. So let's talk about some of the big myths or the misconceptions that we see over and over again. Like we have been doing the Myers-Briggs workshops for the last 20
years.
Yeah. And, like hundreds of workshops with teams, and we see it come to life and play out in so many different ways. So we just wanted to encapsulate some of these myths. So number 1 is that extroverts are happier. And I think, the interesting part about that is that we actually get to see extroverts show or demonstrate their happiness. They'll actually tell you when they're happy, and they'll also tell you when they're not, but they will actually tell you what they're actually feeling more often than introverts. And so that's kind of a misconception, that it really does impact that level of positivity, which isn't the case at all.
There is a little bit of information. So there is a little gem that is hiding in there, and that is that the extroverts are more likely to ask for help when they're not feeling that, that well, or, when they're going through some anxiety. However, people with a preference for introversion tend to hold on to it a little bit more, and you're going to have to dig a little bit, to find out, are you okay? They're not likely to offer that.
That's right. And sometimes what we do see is with the introversion personality is that they can kind of like spiral a little bit, because there is this sense of analysing everything. So because they've got such a rich internal world, there comes a time when there is a little bit of an analysis paralysis. So we have to really watch out for that and check in if we do sense that people with introversion are just going deeper and deeper into their inner world, which is great. However, if it looks like it's becoming a little bit unbalanced and you're not sure, are you okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next misconception is introverts don't like to socialise. So we're going to theme. And that isn't true. It's just that they will socialise in a different way. So the people with a preference for extroversion, if they are socialising, because it will be a party, or it will be loud, or there will be music, and there'll be a lot of activity. People with a preference for introversion, when we ask them in a workshop, for example, you've got $10,000 to spend on a significant, birthday event. How do you want to do it? Oh, I'd have a dinner party with 3 of my closest friends, or 4 of my closest friends, and the money left over I'd put in the bank, or something like that. And so it's not that they don't like to socialise, that they do like to socialise, but they want to do it on their own terms, and it's not necessarily going to be a big fanfare.
Yeah, they're more intimate in the way in which they socialise, and it's really interesting when you actually do see people with introversion at dinner parties speaking about topics that they love. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Correct.
They become so animated.
Great.
And so the third misconception is, so we've kind of like done a little bit of a double barrel, because when we run workshops, these two elements keep coming up time and time again. And that is, the extroverts are more confident. And when we actually ask the extroverts, so are you, confident all the time? And no, it's just that it looks like that way because they are more demonstrative, or they use their body language more. They are more inclined to introduce themselves or to ask a question. They really are open, so we actually get to see what they're thinking. So they may not reflect as much as people with introversion when they're talking, but there is this sense of confidence because they will ask that question, or they will kind of like reach out and connect.
Yeah, and they might look confident because they're talking, and they can talk off the cuff about anything, and they know eventually the answer will come, or the thought will, reveal itself. Yes. And so looking at that, you think, oh, wow, they've got their act together. They're really confident. They just know that they just keep verbalising, it'll come to them.
Yeah, because we actually get to hear them coming to a conclusion about something. Whereas people with introversion, usually they will only share something when it's 100% formed, when they're very clear about how to articulate that and share that with the world.
That's
and
right.
So we get that a lot with the extroverts, that they're really confident. And then the flip side of that is people say that introverts always seem so calm. And again, when we say, so is that true? They go, no, it just looks that way. And the reason why it looks that way is because the way in which people with introversion and extroversion hold their posture is quite different, and the way in which, they use their eye contact. So people with introversion sometimes usually look down and away, and the reason why they're looking down and away isn't because they don't want to connect with you, it's that they're really thinking about what they're actually hearing, so they don't want any more extra sensory input. And also in meetings or in situations, the body language of people with introversion is quite contained. So they can actually have their arms close to their body. Sometimes their arms will be folded. And that, I suppose, seems like an air of calmness around them.
Or arrogant sometimes, they
arrogant,
say.
Yeah.
They can seem arrogant. Yeah.
That's right. And so again, these are misconceptions. So it's not always the case. However, we always say to introverts, you know, that's a big tick for someone, especially in a crisis situation, who can seem calm, even though they're kind of like scrambling underneath. There is this sense of calmness about them.
Okay, and the next misconception is that extroverts are superficial. How does that make you feel? I know. And so what does that mean, superficial? And sometimes this is driven by the fact that people with a preference for extroversion are pretty good at the small talk, because what they're doing is that they're verbalizing their thinking processes, asking lots of questions, trying to find that common ground, trying to find out where they fit in, and they're doing that out in the open instead of standing back and reflecting and observing and getting a sense of the situation. They are actually diving into the situation, trying to make sense of it. And so by peppering the conversation with what we might see as small talk, they could be perceived as being superficial sometimes, particularly by people who have a preference for introversion, who are more likely, they don't want to talk about the weather as a segue into something else and something else. They'd much rather dive into the meaty topic from the get-go. However, you know, we are where we are, and that's just that's an interesting observation. About
and when we describe introverts and extroverts, we usually say, you know, extroverts love breadth of you know, like relationships and events and situations, where introverts love the depth. And the depth comes through focus and concentration, and so that's where the superficiality can come out as well. But there are as many superficial introverts as there are extroverts. Just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
The other myth, you know, myth number 5, is that introverts are less emotional, and it's not that they're less emotional. It's just that they're really good at bottling it up. And Michelle, you mentioned that before. You know, because introverts have such a rich internal life, and they can, they're very self-contained in the way in which they think. There seems to be this sense that they aren't emotional because they're not expressing it. And because a lot of us aren't mind readers, we actually make assumptions on behaviours as opposed to checking in about what's really going on, because perhaps, you know, we don't know what's really going on with people unless we actually check in with them. And the opposite for extroverts is they unload their emotions as they go along, so we actually can hear them unravel as much. So just be mindful that, you know, people with introversion have as much emotional capacity as people with extroversion do.
That's right. It's not a personality thing, basically. So how emotionally intelligent and aware you are. The next one is that we get another misconception is that extroverts are better networkers. Yeah. And this might go back to the previous point, and that is that this idea that networking is about, you know, being in a room with lots of people and connecting with 20 different people and moving, you know, from person to person, finding out, swapping business cards. However, and going back to this point about, you know, the superficiality aspect, asking lots of questions and, you know, having the conversation at that very sort of superficial level, I suppose. And extroverts aren't necessarily better networkers, but what they appear to be good at is the small talk, which can lead to another conversation or another introduction. However, networking is about, you know, making connections, fostering relationships, and you can do that in ways other than being in a large group of people and, you know, talking. You can, and we've seen some fantastic networkers. People with a preference for introversion who are good networkers are great at questioning, because what's the most favourite topic that people have is themselves. That's right. And so we have seen some amazing, you know, networkers who have a preference for introversion because they have cornered the market on asking really great questions, and they have used that as a means of, you know, creating that network or fostering a relationship.
That's right. And because they focus so much on the actual, you know, like the person or the topic, they can go deep. And we find that when people can actually, you know, concentrate in that situation. So they're not kind of like flickering, seeing, oh, what's next, that shiny object, which could, people with extroversion, especially if they don't have high emotional intelligence, could do. I think, you just be mindful of that if you're extrovert. But with the introverts, they can actually go deep, and that's why they can be really good networkers. Yeah. So it's kind of like using their superpower. And then the seventh one is that introverts don't contribute as much, especially in meetings and team gatherings. And this is something that we get all the time, isn't it, Michelle?
Yeah. And it's not that they're not good contributors. It's just that they are less likely. Then they're not sharers in the sense that, there's a topic going on, there's a degree of interest in it, so they're not necessarily going to jump in. They are going to err on the side of holding back until they're asked, or they're asked a second time. And so that can, give people, particularly in a work environment, the impression that maybe they're not contributors.
And sometimes there is this assumption that the only way that you can contribute is through talking. Maybe you can contribute by reflecting, by listening, holding the space, being able to be fully present. There are lots of ways that we can contribute in team activities or even meetings, and it's just broadening, the way in which we think about those differences and diversity, and not judge them as much.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that people with a preference for introversion are just less verbal. They're going to take up less verbal space, and the opportunity there is, to give the space to people with a preference for introversion, because they're gathering, hopefully they're listening, and if you do give them enough space, at the end of the meeting, they will definitely have something really worthwhile to contribute. But if you're talking, us extroverts always talking over them, you're not going to get much out of them. And so it's about providing the space so that people with a preference for introversion can contribute.
Yeah, setting people up for success. And that also reminds me of, like a deadly sin for people with extroversion is we tend to stack on things. So we might be having a conversation with someone that says, oh, yeah, so I want you to think about this, and how about if we look at this, and what if we do that? And someone with introversion, it's going, what? Because they're actually using every piece of information and want to think deeply about every piece of information. And every time we stack it, we're not setting them up for success. So be mindful of that. And the other thing that you alluded to, Michelle, in meetings is if you want the best from people with introversion, you actually usually invite them to participate, like ask them to contribute or ask them their opinion, as opposed to assuming that if they want to say something, they will. No, not necessarily. And, the other thing is that people with introversion will usually get their insights away from the conversation, outside the meeting, and they'll walk away and go, oh, I could have said that, or oh, I could have said that. So are we setting people up to actually capture those afterthoughts? So in a meeting, is there a process or a protocol that you can do to, come back to?
That's a great suggestion. And even before the meeting, are you making it easy for people of either persuasion to contribute in the meeting by giving people a sense of, so what's on the agenda? This is our expectation. These are the decisions that we'd like to make. You're going to get so much better out of both types, actually, but particularly people with a preference for introversion would like to think about it, whereas people with a preference for extroversion, they're going to talk about it. That's how they're doing their thinking.
That's right. Yeah, we hear that.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to just share a bit of a snapshot around personality in the MBTI, and we know that personality in MBTI isn't the answer to everything. It's a tool that people can use to broaden their level of self-awareness and to start to understand the impact that they might be having on other people, because it's those two elements that if you were going to work on anything, understanding yourself and understanding the impact that you're having on other people is really going to bring you a rich life, not
That's
just
right.
in leadership, but a rich life. And our hope is, just by holding on to some of those clues, that you will broaden the way in which you see others and perhaps not jump into judgment as quickly as perhaps we used to. And Michelle and I run workshops all the time on the MBTI, as you know, that we've been doing it for years. And now at this time we have the lockdown in certain areas, and some states opening up and some closing. However, we run virtual Myers-Briggs sessions, and it's amazing how rich these sessions are. So we've done quite a number now virtually, and especially with the technology that we use, especially, we use Zoom quite a lot, and we have Zoom rooms and breakout rooms and things like that. And what it does, it actually helps to flex people's capability and style and communication. So, if that's something that you've been thinking of doing and thinking, I'll wait till, COVID is over, this is the time to do it, because we really want people to come through this significant change better, stronger, more capable and resilient than what they did. And the best way of doing that is to actually grow and develop your people. Think about that. If you want Michelle and I, in your Zoom room, where to contact us, on our website, or info@peopleleaders.com.au. So, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. All right. So, signing off, Michelle.
Yep. Bye, everyone. Okay. Hope you found these tips useful, and give us some feedback.
Yeah.